Welcome back to the British Chronicle, your window into Britain's stories, memories, and timeless moments. If you enjoy this journey, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you'll never miss a new story. Can a nation forget itself? Walk down a British high street today and you may find the answer. Past shuttered shop fronts and silent phone booths, past tired faces under flickering lights. It's not just the bricks and mortar that are crumbling. It's memory itself. Once Britain stood as a symbol of stability. The empire's iron skeleton may have rusted, but the promise remained. A strong welfare state, the best healthcare system in the world, affordable homes, and a society where effort led to reward. Today, that promise feels distant, like a half-remembered tune from a childhood radio, drowned out by the noise of survival. Britain is not poor by nature. It is being made poor by design. And yet most walk blind through this quiet dismantling, too distracted, too weary, or too afraid to speak its name. The term third world is jarring, but look closely and ask, where are we headed? Prices rise faster than wages. The weekly shop grows leaner, yet dearer. Gas, electric, rent, all up. Wages, stubbornly flat. The pound in your pocket stretches thinner with each passing season, a ghost of its former self. Once a modest salary secured a modest life. Now, even that is slipping out of reach. We are working harder, yet sinking deeper, each pay packet devoured before it lands. Inflation, once a word confined to news reports, now lives in every cupboard, every meter reading, every till receipt. And behind the numbers are choices that should never have to be made: heating or eating. 1 in 5 households in Britain faces food insecurity, hidden behind closed doors and drawn curtains. The idea of Britain, of full pantries, warm homes, quiet dignity, is fraying. What remains are packets of processed food, cheap calories with dear consequences. You can still fill a trolley, yes, but not with health, not with hope. Fruit, fish, fresh meat, all symbols of a vanished normalcy. A full fridge used to mean prosperity. Today, it may mean debt. And from the kitchen to the ward, our collapse continues. The NHS was once a jewel, envied around the world. Not just a service, but a statement that no one, rich or poor, should suffer in silence. But now, GP appointments take weeks. A&E corridors are holding cells. Ambulances idle for hours while lives hang in the balance. The NHS isn't dying in one loud bang. It's bleeding out quietly, year after year, reform after reform. Meanwhile, those with means bypass the queue entirely. Private clinics flourish beside broken hospitals. A two-tier health system, once unthinkable, is becoming reality. In this new Britain, your postcode and your payslip may decide your lifespan. This isn't progress. This is retreat. So here's the question. How did a country once known for building the world now struggle to care for its own? Once upon a time, in the trembling dawn of the welfare state, there was a quiet pride in being ordinary. Men in overalls, women with flour on their hands, children with scraped knees and dreams bigger than their terraced homes. Britain wasn't just rich in coin, it was rich in cohesion, in spirit. The factory horn marked more than shifts. It marked the rhythm of a shared life. Today, the horns are silent. The working class, once celebrated as the engine of progress, now wears the scars of abandonment. Nurses, drivers, care workers, people who hold this country together are left fighting battles no one sees. These are not just jobs. They are roles of sacrifice, woven into the very fabric of our society. Yet they're the ones queuing at food banks, skipping meals to feed children, working double shifts and still falling behind. And what of housing? Remember when families dreamed of a home of their own? In the post-war years, entire estates rose like concrete meadows across Britain, offering stability, security, dignity. But now, homes are no longer homes. They are assets, investments, chips in a global game of speculation. A generation once encouraged to own is now forced to rent, at prices that devour wages faster than they are earned. Homelessness is no longer an exception. It's a feature. Families in temporary shelters for months, even years. Shop doorways have become beds. park benches, shelters, and yet society still clings to the myth that homelessness stems from addiction or laziness. But that's a lie. Today, all it takes is a missed paycheck, a broken boiler, a landlord's notice, and the floor disappears beneath your feet. How can we accept this in a country that once built council houses with pride, not shame? Even food, a basic right, has become a battlefield. The supermarkets are full, yes, but nutrition has vanished behind glossy packaging. Try feeding a family on fresh, whole food, and the receipt feels like punishment. The poorest buy what they can, not what they need. And in the silence of their kitchens, chronic illness begins to take root. Diabetes, heart disease, malnutrition, they are the slow, quiet cost of a broken food system. This, too, leads back to the NHS. Illness in Britain is no longer just biological, it is economic. Poorer communities suffer more, live shorter, die younger, and while they wait on lists, on phones, on hope, others are seen instantly, privately, quietly. Health has become a mirror of class, where the reflection is cruel. We often speak of standards of living, but what do we mean when living itself becomes a luxury? In the Britain of old, there was hardship, yes, but there was also solidarity, pubs where names were known, churches where hands met, markets where faces smiled. Community was a currency. But now, the village green has turned gray. The corner shop shuttered. And the children of the coal fields, the shipyards, the textile mills, what legacy were they handed? Where did all that belonging go? It did not collapse all at once. There was no siren, no warning bell. The decline of Britain came in waves, quiet, bureaucratic, calculated. Policies dressed as progress, cuts disguised as reform. And as each pillar was shaved down, education, health, housing, transport, the people were told to carry on, to work harder, to be grateful, to wait. But something has shifted. The cost crisis is no longer temporary. It has become permanent. People no longer plan holidays but heating schedules. Children skip meals without complaint. Pensioners sit in libraries not for books but warmth. And all the while the headlines speak of recovery, of growth, of stability. But outside those headlines, there is a different Britain. One where a record number of working families rely on food banks. One where nearly half of all low-income households report skipping meals regularly. What we are witnessing is not a recession, it is erosion, and its most painful form is debt. Credit cards, payday lenders, buy now, pay later schemes, they cling to the weary like barnacles on a sinking ship. The average British household now holds more than $65,000 in debt. Not for luxuries, for survival, for food, for rent, for medical travel. We no longer save for the future. We borrow from it. Every month is borrowed time. Even the systems designed to protect us have turned. Council services are hollowed out. Job centers are overrun. Mental health services wait months for referrals. And all the while, the same question beats louder. How did we get here? Look up. There is another Britain, one most of us will never touch. In gated estates and private clubs, decisions are made with polished smiles. The political class and their donors dine together. Laws are shaped in boardrooms. Policy is brokered over wine more expensive than a week's groceries. The elite own more than property. They own the narrative. Energy firms post record profits while families sit in the dark. Rail companies raise fares while trains fail to arrive. Foreign hedge funds scoop up British housing stock while first-time buyers are priced out entirely. The very foundations of this country, land, transport, utilities, have been carved and sold, not for need, but for gain. And here lies the bitter truth. This was not mismanagement. This was strategy. Privatization was once sold to us as efficiency. Modernization. But look around. Where is the modern Britain? In towns once powered by coal and steel, there are no jobs, no trains, no youth clubs, no hope. Just betting shops, boarded pubs, and memories. Where once the roaring sound of industry filled the air, now only silence remains. The silence of loss, of a country that traded sovereignty for stock options. So when we ask ourselves, How could something so big disappear so completely? We must remember, it didn't disappear. It was taken. The years pass, but the cost of what was lost only deepens. In post-war Britain, a sense of duty once flowed from top to bottom. The government built not just roads and railways, but a sense of direction. Leaders talked of public good, not just private enterprise. But today, the language has changed. Market forces, shareholder value, return on investment. These phrases have replaced care, stewardship, and legacy. And the people, left behind in this linguistic shell game, are paying for it. The response from society has been fragmented. Some still hope quietly. Others turn angry. Many have simply shut down. Communities that once gathered at the local church or community hall now find themselves atomized. Parents work longer hours, children are raised by screens, and neighbors become strangers. We scroll more, speak less. The fabric of togetherness has worn thin. Local councils, once the lifeblood of towns and cities, now operate on emergency budgets. Libraries shuttered. Youth centers closed. Public toilets locked. Streets grow darker, not just from failing streetlights, but from a deeper gloom. An eerie acceptance now hangs over many neighborhoods, a resignation that things may never improve. The irony is sharp. We live in a digital age surrounded by instant connections, yet more isolated than ever. Loneliness has become an epidemic. According to the Office for National Statistics, nearly 7.1% of adults in Britain feel lonely often or always. Among young people, that number is even higher. What was once the pride of a nation, a strong middle class, a common culture of support, now feels like a relic. And in its place, a permanent underclass is forming, not defined by race or location, but by economic captivity. They are the families juggling 3 jobs and still needing universal credit, the elderly who cut pills in half to make prescriptions last, the students who graduate not with dreams, but with decades of debt. And yet the public is often told, things are better than they seem. Statistical tricks mask the pain. GDP figures rise, but whose income does that growth reflect? Unemployment falls, because zero-hour contracts count as jobs. Inflation eases, yet butter costs 30% more than last year. The reality felt on the ground tells a far different story than what's written in spreadsheets. Still, there are flickers of resistance. Community food banks, clothing swaps, mutual aid groups. They spring up like wildflowers between concrete slabs. Not out of charity, but solidarity. People helping people, not because they are told to, but because they must. These acts don't make headlines, but they are where humanity survives. The British spirit hasn't disappeared. It has simply moved underground. Yet we are left with a haunting question. How long can a society endure like this, before even the wildflowers stop growing? Beneath the rubble of policy failures and economic despair, something still flickers. A memory, a lesson, a trace of what Britain once meant. We were a nation that built not just for profit, but for posterity. The post-war architects of the NHS, the welfare state, and council housing did not see themselves as merely managing decline. They saw themselves as gardeners of a better future. What they planted, though now withered in places, still holds roots in the public psyche. And perhaps that is why the current decay cuts so deeply. Because we remember. We remember when a postman could own a home, when nurses weren't forced to rely on food banks, when trains ran on time not for shareholder profit, but for the worker's dignity. There was pride in order, security in routine. A trust that, though imperfect, the system was on your side. Today, that trust has corroded, but the ache for it remains. So what can we learn from this disintegration? First, that economic wealth means little without moral purpose. A rising GDP cannot bandage a collapsing health service or a school without books. Second, that privatization, when unbound from responsibility, consumes rather than contributes. The great sell-off of British assets did not distribute power. It concentrated it, offshore, behind paywalls, beyond scrutiny. But perhaps most critically, we learned that the social contract is not indestructible. It can be broken slowly with every delayed ambulance, every unaffordable rent hike, every meal skipped in silence. Still, within that collapse lies an opportunity for reckoning. Some of the values that built the old Britain remain buried but not gone. A respect for fair play, a belief in the dignity of labor, a reverence for public service. If these could once raise a nation from the ashes of war, could they not, once more, stir a new foundation? Across the country, small movements are forming. Workers unionizing after decades of dormancy. Teachers marching not just for pay, but for classrooms that work. Cleaners, carers, and couriers, once invisible, now speak with clarity. Their voices are not always heard, but they are growing. Because the greatest wealth Britain ever possessed was not in the vaults of the City of London. It was in its people, their resilience, their stubborn decency, their insistence that things could be better, not just for themselves, but for the stranger next door. We lost sight of that for a time, but now, under pressure, those values are stirring again. So the question becomes, will we listen? Will we honor the legacy not just by remembering it, but by rebuilding it? And so we arrive at the present, not as a destination, but as a crossroad. Britain today is not what it was. But it is not beyond saving. To many, the decline feels irreversible. But history reminds us, no empire, no system, no decline is ever final. There were times in the past when the country stood at the edge of despair. After the war, in the midst of deindustrialization, during the financial crises. Each time it found its footing not through austerity or slogans, but through collective will, shared sacrifice, and bold vision. The future now hangs on a question far deeper than policy or elections. It is the question of what success really looks like. Is it a society where children sleep in hotels and parents juggle 3 jobs, while luxury flats sit empty as investment assets? Is it growth measured by hedge fund profits, while community centers fall into ruin? Is it a version of Britain where a week's holiday abroad costs less than a weekend at home? Or is success something quieter, older, more rooted? Time with family, without anxiety clawing at the edge of sleep. A home that is safe, warm, and secure. A job that provides more than survival, dignity, even pride. Healthcare that heals, not just for those who can afford it. Streets that are not just lit, but alive. Communities that speak, remember, and care. These are not extravagant dreams. They are basic entitlements, once guaranteed, now debated. The truth is, Britain has not run out of money. It has run out of honesty. It has run out of fairness. And it has run out of patience from the people who were told for decades that things would get better if they just worked a little harder. That if they just waited, sacrificed, endured, it would all be worth it in the end. But hope without justice is not hope. It is control. So now, more than ever, we must ask, what kind of country do we want to become? Not just for the next election cycle, but for the next generation. Will we let the silence spread further? Or will we speak boldly, loudly, together? Because the factories may be gone, the coal fields silent, the high streets hollowed, but the voice of a people who remember who they are, that is harder to erase. And yet, one final haunting thought lingers. But is that really the whole story?